The numbers are in for how much Kentucky Senate candidates are spending on their races. We just showed you polling from Kentucky's GOP Senate primary. The fundraising paints a much different picture. The money gap between Congressman Andy Barr and former Attorney General Daniel Cameron is just as wide as before. Barr ending this quarter with $6.6 million in the bank. Cameron with just over $600,000. And now for the first time, we're seeing Nate Morris's fundraising, who in addition to donations, put in $3 million of his own money and ends the quarter with $1 million cash on hand.
Really kind of what people predicted. Number one, that Andy Barr was going to be the leader in terms of money on hand and money raised from other donors. That Nate Morris has put in a lot of his own money and raised $1 million, which is not a small sum by any means. And that Daniel Cameron continues to lag behind, only raising about $400,000.
RWB political analyst Jonathan Miller says he would not be surprised if more attacks are directed towards Cameron in the weeks ahead to break his polling lead, especially coming from the Barr camp. So, Trey, I'll start with you here. Will money be all the difference? We were just talking about polling in the last block. We've seen other candidates, in the past. Think about Kelly Craft for governor. Amy McGrath in her last Senate run put a lot of money in, and it didn't work out for them. What do you think based on these numbers?
I mean, it's important. It's not everything, because at some level, it's important how you spend it. I think Daniel Cameron, we talked in the last segment about his struggles with fundraising. Yeah, he raised $411,000, which isn't great. He also spent $311,000 this quarter, so he was only able to bank an extra $100,000. Well, you got to start. You see Congressman Barr building up a huge bankroll. That's because you have to up your TV spending and your radio spending, your digital ad buys as you get close to Election Day. When Cameron can only bank that $100,000, and when you really break it down, a lot of it was spent on the fundraising. I remember back in the 2016 presidential primary, Ben Carson had one quarter where he raised like $10 million, but he spent like $9.5 million to raise the $10 million. So, I think Cameron is really, he's spending a lot of money just to raise the little he's getting. Barr, I think, only spent $1.2 million out of the $1.8 that he raised, so he was able to bank a pretty good amount. Nate Morris, the money's immaterial there, more or less, because he's just going to stroke checks, so there's going to be outside groups that come in. So really, when you talk money, it's about Cameron and Barr. And again, when you look at not just the fundraising, but how it's being spent, I love Daniel Cameron. I don't see how he keeps up.
Morgan, what do you think?
I agree. To Trey's point, money's not everything. Of course, you referenced candidates that poured a lot of money into it and didn't have the outcome. Sometimes had a large vote difference at the end of the day. But to Trey's point, it's about how you spend it. You can raise all the money in the world, and if you're not spending it effectively and saving it and banking it for the last 3 months before Election Day, you're not spending it wisely. Daniel Cameron lagging in fundraising is not new to anyone, including Daniel Cameron. That's where he was in the gubernatorial too, and I think it just shows the lack of faith and connection with donors and with voters that he has despite those polling numbers.
Well, it's important to remember too, to bring Nate Morris kind of back in the conversation, candidate money spends more expensively than any other money, because you get more bang for your buck. When you're buying TV and when you're buying radio, you get what's called the lowest available rate, which means whatever the lowest rate is that a station is selling an ad to anybody, whether it's
a department that knows about that.
Yeah, a pawn shop or McDonald's or a law firm, whatever the lowest rate is for that ad block, the candidate has to get that rate, is guaranteed that rate. The super PACs, stations jack those rates up. They're paying absolute top dollar for their ads. So the candidate money goes a lot further when you're spending it on media. So that's where Barr's money, if he ends up with a $4 or $5 million lead on even Morris as far as cash on hand in the campaign, that equals out to like an extra, half an ad, an extra ad or so with the money he can spend, just because of the value you get spending it from candidate dollars rather than super PAC dollars.
Very quickly, I want to put the Democrats fundraising up on the screen real quick. We've seen the numbers here for 3 candidates. Amy McGrath got in a little bit late, so we've not seen hers just yet. We are seeing a big standout from Joel Willett so far. Pam Stevenson, she's got $25,000 cash on hand. She's also got a lot of debt, which is not reflected on that graph. And then we have Logan Forsythe, who's also, kind of staying on par with how much Stevenson's raised. Any chief takeaways y'all are seeing from those numbers on the Democrat side?
The Logan Forsythe one was interesting because he comes from a very politically active law firm with a lot of donors, and there are no donors from his law firm on his report, which Why you wouldn't go after that money first? Maybe he's planning a big event to maximize that. I don't know. But why that wouldn't be your very first set of calls to fill out your campaign treasury, I don't know. That was the one interesting thing that stood out to me on all three of those reports.
Last word on this, Morgan.
Yeah, of course, Democrats are in the game too. We've spent most of the time talking about Republicans. Joel Willett, that reflects a lot of his professional background. He comes from a pretty kind of well-funded area of the business world, has a large national security background of donors he can pull from. To Trey's point, I think there is a lot of money out there for other Democratic candidates. It's just about them sitting down and doing the work to get that money in. Of course, as ED of the Kentucky Democratic Party, I will be on top of them and making sure that they're making all their calls and doing all their asks. But I think it'll be really informative to see Amy McGrath's fundraising report next quarter and see where that money's coming from, if it's in Kentucky or out of the state, and what those other candidates have done to shore up their Kentucky resources.
And there are other candidates getting in. I think those numbers reflect the fact that none of the major donors believe that this field is settled.
All right.